Mike Stevens is my co-producer of the speaker series of the Exeter UFO Festival and is the founder of Granite Sky. Mike is a New Hampshire native born and bred and a seasoned paranormal researcher and investigator. He has worked to change the stigma surrounding the abduction phenomena by promoting public awareness of the subject and by encouraging and supporting other experiencers. Mike is the initiating force behind the New Hampshire historical marker for Betty and Barney Hill, their UFO encounter in the location, and about his involvement in the paranormal and UFO community, and been interviewed by newspapers, television, and radio about his involvement in the paranormal and UFO communities, both locally and internationally. Mike, over the years, has become a very trusted source of New Hampshire UFO history. He is a great asset, a secret weapon. Without him, I'm not sure how this event would run. Please give him a big welcome.
All right, thank you guys and good morning. Just give me half a second here. Alrighty. So as Peter just said, my name is Mike Stevens and I am the founder of Granite Sky Services. Granite Sky Services is a group, an organization that focuses on providing support to anybody in need who has had a UFO abduction encounter, anything that's kind of thrown them off kilter. Our main thing, our logo is people, not proof. There's a use for nuts and bolt ufology, but it doesn't need to come first. I look at it this way. If there was a building on fire and there were people inside, it's more important to get the people out first than to figure out how the fire started. There's always time for that after the fact, but we need to focus on the people and stop trying to prove everything first. We need to take care of our people. Basically, I'll just kind of click through these. You can go to the website and I'll give that to you again at the end. Just basically anything you can think of, whether it's one-on-one talk, if you're not comfortable in a group setting. We have group settings that are open to the public as well as private groups. If you need to come out to your family or coworkers, we'll help assist you with that. And anything you can think of in between, we'll do what we can to assist you. Why this is so important to me is because I'm a lifelong experiencer, with my experiences starting around the age of 3.5, or at least that I remember starting around the age of 3.5. And if you want to learn more about them, you can check out Granite Skies, written by Nomar Slevik. He's a local Maine author, and it's pretty much available everywhere, Amazon, and all that stuff. As Bob said, he said 12, but this makes 10 years since me and Valerie came to the Kiwanis as Seacoast officers and said we'd like to get involved and we'd like to help any way we could. And the only thing I can say from there is what a long, strange trip it's been. The Kiwanis have put me at about every function of this festival except from flipping burgers. I think we can figure out why. So I think we're all grateful for that. But most importantly, you know, the Kiwanis do a great job. Peter does a great job. I work my tail off behind the scenes. But this conference is nothing without you guys. You guys are what make it. It doesn't matter what we do, who we get up here for speakers, what little events we can come up with. None of that matters if you guys don't show up. So you guys are the true heroes. So thank you for giving me 10 great years of memory. But we're gonna get into it now. The coast with the most. We're gonna take a look almost chronologically at different cases from the East Coast and the West Coast. we're playing a little loosely with the word coast, but kind of east to west as we go through. Some of these cases, you could come up here and do a full 2-hour presentation on the case itself. I obviously don't have time or the willingness to do that today. So, you know, we're going to give a basic rundown on some of them, the important features of it, but you're not going to get necessarily the full story. So if you hear a case that you're really interested in, you know, come ask me later or feel free to look it up yourself. We're going to start in 1942, the Battle of LA. February 24th of 1942, this is kind of what triggered the modern day UFO phenomena. People like to go back to Roswell, but it kind of really started here. Of course, they blamed it as a weather balloon and war jitters. You got to remember, Pearl Harbor was just bombed a month before this. We were on edge. So what happened was the air sirens went off, the spotlights went up, and something appeared in the sky. Somebody started firing at it, and once somebody started firing, everybody started firing at it. The shells were bouncing off the object, so pretty sure it was not a weather balloon. The incident resulted in 5 deaths, some from the shrapnel falling back down, 2 were heart attacks, but they just put it off as war jitters. It was, this is nothing here to see, nothing to look at. It's just war jitters. So it's not the first time we got the jitters over a UFO story. So we're going to actually backtrack a little bit and go to 1938. October 30th of 1938, Orson Welles did his rendition of The War of the Worlds with the Mercury Theater on CBS. CBS was not the most popular station at the time, so they think a lot of people tuned in late after another show ended and didn't catch the beginning. For those who saw Peter's talk yesterday, even though there were commercials, even though there was all this in between, some people did panic. It's been over-exaggerated. It's not like the whole country or all of New Jersey panicked and thought we're under attack, but it made a good headline. Even back then, we can already start laughing at the UFO community and the believers. But before we change the radio dial, we have to ask, what's the frequency, Kenneth? Which of course is going to be June 24th, 1947, the Kenneth Arnold story or sighting by Mount Rainier. He was going on a business trip and he decided to take a small detour because there was a crashed plane in the general area that had a $5,000 reward if anybody could find it. So he decided he was going to take a little side loop, looked for it for a few minutes, didn't see anything, and went back on his route. As he was coming back into his route, that's when he noticed the 9-shaped, more crescent bat-wing-shaped objects. As he was telling reporters and this and that, he was describing the motion of the objects, not the shape of them. And he was saying they kind of moved like if you skipped a stone across water, and the reporter hastily wrote it down and came out with the terms flying saucer, and we've been using it ever since. And Kenneth, the Maury Island incident. So Maury Island is in Washington, not all that far from where Kenneth had his sightings. This was just actually a few days before Kenneth Arnold's sighting on June 21st, 1947. Harold Dahl and his crew were out near Maury Island, and they saw 6 donut-shaped UFOs come in with a hole like in the center. They said the objects then began dripping down metal like lava. It broke a crewman's arm and killed his son's dog. So they sent people out to investigate it, the Air Force, or Army at that point, I think. And when they were flying these samples of the material back, the airplane crashed, killing the 2 airmen and losing the samples. This is also one of our earliest examples of Men in Black, as he was approached, Harold Dahl was approached by a man in a black suit and asked not to talk about the incident ever again. Colliding cosmos. Here we're going to talk about Roswell and Corona. The two are so muddled in history together that there's 2 debris fields, but nobody knows if it's one incident or 2. One of the leading theories is that 2 objects came in together and collided and exploded in air, creating different debris fields. Another theory is that there was a thunderstorm and the object got hit by lightning and was downed. My personal theory is, if we go back to 1942, we learned that our caveman sticks and stones approach to attacking these things didn't work, but by 47, we had figured out how to shoot them down using different types of technology, EMF pulses, that sort of thing. Because this would happen again in 1948 in Aztec, New Mexico. So it seems that we developed something in the area, and it was kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, because as we've learned as the years have gone on, especially into the 60s and stuff, the more we start playing with nukes and powerful weapon, these things like to come around. So I think that whole sort of thing starts there. The one thing we're all pretty sure of, despite what they told us, is that it was not a balloon. You must think we're some kind of dummies. Frenzied farmers. So on May 11th, 1950, Evelyn and Paul Trent's farm, she was out feeding the rabbits, and she was coming back to the farmhouse, and she noticed something in the sky. She called to Paul. He came out and saw it as well. He went into the car because he thought that's where he left his camera. And then it wasn't there, so he went in the house and he found it and eventually came out and snapped the picture. This was on the 11th, but it wasn't digital film back then. He still had pictures left on his roll to develop. So even though they had thought they had just captured a UFO, they waited until May 14th after Mother's Day to finish up the roll of film before getting it developed. So yeah, that's obviously the McMinnville, Oregon. They have a conference and festival just like we do. They celebrate their picture. And it's one of the earliest ones that was thought to be credible. With any of these, somebody's going to say it was hoaxed on a string, on a wire. You can't win them all, but it was in Life magazine that following June. The Summer of Saucers. Obviously, there were UFO sightings in the summer of 1952 all across the country. But obviously the most famous is going to be the DC sightings over the Capitol. The weekends of July 19th and 20th and a weekend of July 26th and 27th were the two highlights of the sightings at the Capitol, which, kind of captured the nation. Everybody's like, oh, if they're real, why don't they take over and land on the White House lawn? It wasn't quite like that, but, that was about as close as we got. This is the actual photo that appeared in Life magazine and made all the things. The official explanation for this was temperature inversion, even though the weather was basically the same through many of the nights of the summer, and it was not reported. It was, again, just one of those just go away answers. Moving closer to us, also 1952, we have the photos from the Salem Naval Yard, taken by Shell Alpert. These have been tried to be dismissed as a reflection of lampposts, of this, that, which doesn't say much about how they felt about their own intelligence. Shell Alpert wasn't just on base with a camera. He was their leading photographer. So if he couldn't tell the difference between a reflection in a window, kind of have some problems. Again, they just try to stash this stuff away without actually explaining it. And then, again, 1952, we have the Passaic photos from July 31st, taken by George Stock. And again, much like the Trent photos, it's a different style of UFO, but very similar, just kind of out and about. Not people looking for this stuff, just happened to see it. Comic contact. During the 50s, the contact movement was widespread across the United States. Basically, this was people thinking they were communicating with aliens, UFOs, without necessarily having physical contact. But I'm going to just highlight one case because it's pretty local. Frances Swan, out of Eliot, Maine, in 1954, began automatic writing saying she was receiving messages, communications from an alien race. They wanted her to talk to the Navy, according to her. And there was a retired gentleman from the Navy who lived a couple houses down. So they began talking with her, and she wasn't highly educated, but she wasn't uneducated either. So they would ask her questions that she should have no way of knowing, and she would answer them with ease. In 1974, the story was highlighted in a film, UFOs Past, Present, and Future, hosted by Rod Sterling, who we probably all know from The Twilight Zone. Throughout the years, the Betty and Barney Hill thing happened, and Elliot's right there, Portsmouth's right there where the Hills were. And Betty said that Frances would never speak to her. She said that the aliens that they encountered had the wrong vibe, the wrong energy, and refused to ever speak to Betty. Speaking of Betty, taken for granted. I think we all know this story, but we'll go over it real quick. September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill are coming back from a honeymoon that they never got. After they got married, they were working, they didn't have time to do a honeymoon or anything like that. So they decided to go up to Niagara Falls and, get their honeymoon in, just have a little vacation. As they were coming home, Betty noticed the light, and she started seeing it move, and Barney was just trying to hush her, like, no, this isn't, it's an airplane, don't worry about it. Barney wasn't into this. Betty was enthralled because Betty's sister, Kathleen Martin's mother, who we've had speak here many times, had previously told Betty that she had seen a UFO. And that's what piqued Betty's interest in that. So they get to the Mount Cleveland area to let the dog out of the car and get a good look at this object. Barney sees it make a movement that is not a plane. He starts to get a little freaked out, so they start getting on down the road. They see the object pass by, the light on top of Twin Mountain blocking it out as it passed over. When they got to the old man of the mountain, they saw the object next to it. And because we know the dimensions of how big the old man of the mountain is, they were able to describe how big they thought this object was. Going further down Route 3, they thought about stopping at Indian Head Resort for the night just to get away from it, and then said, no, let's just get home. Got a little further down. The object kind of drops in front of them and makes Barney stop the car. The object hops to the side, and Barney gets his, first good look with the binoculars at him and sees what he sees as almost German soldiers in the windows. And immediately his first thought is, they're going to capture us. So he gets back in the car and they start going down the road. The next thing they know, they hear a series of metallic beeps. The next thing they know, they are miles down the road with no memory of driving that far. They realize when they get home that, it's later than they thought, but they didn't really think too much of it. They just get in. Then they start noticing things like Betty's dress is torn, Barney's shoes are scuffed. They can't really, figure out what happened. But at this point, they weren't claiming they were abducted by aliens. That didn't come out till much later. And it was actually because of Barney. Barney was having ulcers because of the stress of not knowing what happened, of not being able to recall, and it was literally eating him from the inside out. So his doctor said, why don't you try hypnosis? Maybe if we can just let you remember what you're forgetting, we can get rid of this ulcer problem. This had nothing to do with UFOs. It was for medical purposes. And then once they started uncovering that, they brought Betty in, and pretty much the rest is history, and that's that. But it didn't really give Barney the relief he needed. It did end up killing him. He only lasted till 1969. So. Daylight discs. So this next person we're going to talk about was 7 years old at the time War of the Worlds aired in 1938. He remembers overhearing it from his bedroom as his parents listened. And it kind of intrigued him more as a sci-fi thing. He wasn't really all that interested in the UFO subject yet. This man was Bud Hopkins. He would later fully become interested in UFOs. In 1964, over Cape Cod, he saw several objects in the daylight. So between that early impression from the War of the Worlds, his own sightings, that's how he first got his start into the UFO subject. And then, of course, we know him for being like the father of abduction research, a great author and speaker on the subject, and really a champion of it. But at the time in 1964, he reported it to the Otis Air Force Base, and he was unsatisfied with their response. They basically just told him to kick rocks. They weren't going to look into it. They weren't going to do anything. And that also helped fuel him to say, there's got to be more answers than this. I got to start looking into it. Seacoast saucers, which is the reason for this season, why we're all here today. Obviously, the incident in Exeter, this one should be a given. I shouldn't have to go into it too much. I think we all know the story. Norman Muscarello, 18 years old, was walking back from Amesbury, Massachusetts. When he got to Kensington, a bright red object swooped at him, and he tripped and fell over his own 2 feet and fell in the ditch. He laid there until he thought it was safe, pounded on the neighboring farmhouse. Ends up they were home, but they weren't going to answer at that hour for that craziness. So he was lucky enough to spot a car coming down the road, and the car brought him back to the Exeter police station, which is, at the time, was right under our feet, now where the Chamber of Commerce is. So when he got there, he told Reginald Tolan what had happened, and they could tell he was shooken up, but the story couldn't be what he said it was. So Eugene, yeah. But Eugene in the right there, or yeah, my left, you're right, was interested by the story when he got to the station and heard it, because he had just got off 101 earlier, where there were 2 women pulled over in a car, who were frantic, who had been chased for 12 miles by a red object in the sky. He thought they were kind of kooks, but calmed him down, sent him on his way, got back and heard this. They got out to the site. They didn't see anything at first. He radioed in that they were going to get out of the car, so that's when David Hunt started en route to the site as well. Bertram and Muscarello got out into the paddocks, and that's when the object reappeared from behind the tree line. Muscarello was frozen in terror. Bertram dropped to his knee and pulled out his service revolver just out of instinct, thought better of it, and dragged Muscarello back to the car. And right about then is when Hunt pulled up, and all 3 men watched the object float off towards Hampton. They said at its closest, it was about 100 feet from them, and it was about 100 feet wide. This wasn't something you could mistake as temperature inversion or a refueling mission or any of the other nonsense excuses they gave for the incident. If we go forward in time, not necessarily related to Exeter, you have the infamous swamp gas case in Michigan. The congressman of Michigan at the time, Gerald Ford, said, these answers are not satisfactory. They're not going to fly anymore, and started the first congressional hearing on UFOs, which the Exeter case was brought forward because of the outstanding records of these police officers. And that's the short version of Exeter. Crash at Kecksburg. So 1965 was a strange year on the East. You start with Exeter in September. October comes out, and that's when Betty and Barney Hill's story gets leaked into the Boston Traveler. November, we have the Great Northeast Blackout. And then in December, this. December 9th, 1965. So for those who don't know, Kecksburg is the far end of Pennsylvania. It's not quite Pittsburgh, but you're a lot closer to Pittsburgh than Philadelphia. Something fell out of the sky. People witnessed it over several states, and they tried to blame it as a Russian satellite at first, except it changed course. As it was coming east, it dipped down and moved back up. And that also doesn't match the witnesses' description. Those who saw it said it didn't necessarily so much crash. It was more of a hard landing. It looked like it tried to hover or stop itself, slow down before it landed. The military shows up in force. They basically took over a farmhouse, made it headquarters. They were plowing through fences just to get down to this thing before anybody else could see it as they closed off the area. The local fire department, it's a volunteer fire department, they were already on scene. Everybody had seen it. Some people claimed that they saw the military try to open a hatch out of the bottom of this thing. Others say they saw a hand with 3 lizard-like fingers hanging out from a tarp. Kecksburg's a small town. It's type of town where if you're not from there, they instantly know it. It doesn't mean they're bad people. They just know you don't belong there. And so not everybody made it down to the site to see it, but by the time this happened and they cleaned it up and everybody got there, almost everybody in the town saw the military convoy leaving. Now, if it's a satellite, if it's this, we're in the space race kind of still, but this military presence for a satellite was a little aggressive when you look at the timeline. We're involved in wars. We have other interests going on than to send our military, and NASA apparently showed up at the site as well, if this was just a satellite. If it was just a satellite, why could you take a picture of it and put it in the newspaper? Well, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense with the official explanation, but that is basically old hat by this point anyways, I think, for most of us. Yeah, baby, let's shag. No, not that way, you guys. Grow up. Shag Harbor. So October 4th, 1967, there were multiple prior sightings to what becomes the incident. At first, a couple other planes thought they saw something in their airspace that shouldn't be there. Couldn't get any radio readings back to make sure their area was clear. There are a couple other reports of just strange lights. But the main case starts with Lori Wickens and 4 friends. They're driving up and they see these 4, 5 lights start making a 45-degree angle from the sky down towards the harbor. They immediately call it in because their first thought is not, oh, we saw a UFO. They're thinking a plane went down. So they call it in. Everybody's out there from small fishing boats, who's ever closest, till the bigger, official response gets there, and everybody's going to look for this thing. They saw it hit the water, but they said there was no explosion, no splash, and they saw it go out about 1,000 feet, these lights in the water, before they lost track of it. Canada's really memorized the event. They do have a festival there every year, Shag Harbor, to celebrate. And they actually even have the event on a coin. It's one of 2 UFO coins they have, so U.S. Mint needs to get on it. But they could never find anything. There was never any explanation. The only thing that I do know, if they did find something, they were going to need a bigger boat. The Watchers. This is one of those cases that is too big not to mention, but too big to get into today and all this. The Betty Andreessen account basically starts January 25th, 1967 in South Ashburnham, Massachusetts. She's in the kitchen with her parents and 7 kids. The lights go out. Her father walks kind of towards the back door, and he sees little things that remind him almost of like little people, but they're not quite people, and a pinkish light. And that's all. He kind of just says it and then moves about life. It's not really revisited within the family. Much like Charlie and the Hills, it wasn't until later that reoccurring dreams started pestering Betty. So it was in 1977 she went and got hypnotized to try to find some of the meaning behind these dreams, and so forth. And it becomes one of the quintessential abduction cases. It has stuff from, missing time, implants, all the regular stuff you expect to see. It took Raymond Fowler 4 books to tell her story, not to mention her and her husband wrote their own book about the experiences. It's a huge case, and right here locally out of Massachusetts. And speaking of Massachusetts, bizarre Berkshires. Again, Labor Day weekend of 1969. We have it was best known as the Reed family case. There are other stories of abduction claims around the lake in that area at that time. There are about 250 witnesses, but the Tom Reed family case is probably the most well known. They were coming back from the movies towards the old covered bridge, and they saw this object. They tried to outrun it, but they couldn't. It immobilized the car, and just with a blue beam of light. That was all they remembered at the time, for a little bit. Tom has become public about his case. He's really talked about it. His brother Matthew was deeply affected. Very, very, very rarely talks about it. And it wasn't this, for the area, it was kind of a one-time big deal where everybody, the whole town almost, saw it that night. But for Tom and his brother, it was not their first abduction. They have many more other memories of it. And Tom described the object, the aliens, as looking very almost insectoid. Tom now has turned the area next to the bridge where it happened, so another great place like Exeter where you can actually touch, feel where it happened, created a park there, a UFO park for, just people to enjoy as a park, but just to let the memory live on. He battled with the town with it for years. They removed his monument. Even though we have the marker for Betty and Barney Hill here, that's recognized historically, not as a UFO thing, but because of the cultural significance. That is historical. That is why they pushed the marker through. On Tom's case, he actually had the governor, Charlie Baker at the time, sign off that this was historically true and accurate. So he is right now the only official documented case in the United States. But yeah, it's a great park, and we support it. I have a solar light down there, and there's other benches by other sponsors, Travis Walton, the Roswell Museum, and it's a great little park if you're ever in the area. It is a ride, but it's worth seeing if you're out there. Fire in the Sky. This is another one I think you guys all know, but real quickly. Travis Walton. November 5th, 1975. They are logging the Apache Site Graves National Forest. They're coming out and they see what looks like a forest fire. They're logging out the area. There's one road in, there's one road out. So this is very alarming to them. Not that any forest fire is not alarming to anybody, but if it's gonna block your path out, you wanna get going, see what it is, what you're up against. So they get up to the light and they realize it's not a fire. Travis, who admits now, stupidly, gets out of the truck and stands under it. He doesn't know if he got too close or if he accidentally bumped it, but it knocks him out and sends him flying. The rest of the guys panic and take off. They decide, obviously, they don't know what's going on, but they can't leave Travis out there, dead or alive. They have to go back and at least, pick him up. They go back there and they can't find him. Travis would remain missing for 5 days. And the movie, if you've seen the movie, it is the most inaccurate thing you will ever see. Travis has changed his tune a little bit over the years, but he really doesn't think they took him, that they're bad. He thinks because of his own stupidity, they took him to save him, to bring him back, because he wasn't supposed to be there. They didn't do it on purpose. It's like anything, he's been the biggest name for a long time. People take their shots, he's fake, it's that. They did it to get out of the logging company. Mike Rogers, the logging crew, has come out and said about it, but you also have to understand that Mike and Travis are family. He really did marry Mike's sister. There were family problems that they disagreed on too. This was about money, this is about family things. It wasn't, you got to take that into consideration when Mike comes out and says, that Travis is lying. After he's changed his story, 30 years later, trying to cash in. And a funny side note that has absolutely nothing to do with the UFOs. So we all think of Travis as a good guy, because he is. He is, I love him. So when he was about 22, Mike Rogers has another brother, and him and Travis were stealing checks and signing them. They got caught. They had to, do probate, whatever, their thing. So that's how Travis gets introduced to Mike Rogers to end up on this crew to begin with. So there you have that. The Fab Four. No, we're not talking about the Beatles, but it is a good time to mention John Lennon's August 23rd, 1974 UFO sighting. I don't really need to get into this one, because if you were here yesterday, Charlie rocked this place. The Allagash 4, Charlie, again, there's no need for me to cover this. Ask him. He covered it so beautifully. But basically, yeah, they went out, they saw the UFO, everybody agreed there was a UFO, fire burnt down too quick, and then, the regressions and all that. The other thing about that, though, too, is to remember it's not really all that far in time or distance from all the stuff that was going on at Loring Air Force Base. This Loring, because it's like close, but all these SAC bases were having UFO trouble at the time, incidents. So to me, it's just another layer. One, Charlie is just so down to earth. Why wouldn't you believe him? But it's just another layer of saying, yes, it connects. There's other pieces, say, stuff's going on up there. Hudson Valley. The Hudson Valley Flap, or whatever, was one of the biggest and longest running UFO hotspots, which basically took up most of the 80s and into the 90s. There were multiple sightings of multicolored crafts, objects with lights, and it was just, again, thousands and thousands and thousands of reports spanning a decade. There's also Pine Bushes in that area where they now have their Pine Bush Festival to, kind of support their history of the Pine Bush Festivals. And again, they came out with all kinds of excuses. They were saying it was hang gliders flying tight together in formation with lights. It was, planes flying in. And some of them might have been. I'm sure once it started picking up speed and began to be a thing for real, I'm sure you got some people who said, hey, I'm going to have a little fun with this and let's do it. But for the most part, most of the sightings were legit sightings. Whitley's Winter. December 26, 1985, in his cabin in upstate New York, Whitley Strieber had this, what I would call a trigger moment. He recalls an abduction experience at the cabin. This is what leads him to write Communion, and starts opening up his mind to remembering this isn't a new thing. This has been going on since I was a child. And it really, for the first time, kind of caught the public off guard. The book cover really startled people. Well, some people were automatically drawn to it. Other people were repulsed and couldn't go near it. And it's one of those big steps where UFOs come out of the sci-fi category and into more of, hey, could this be happening? Gulf breeze. So, Gulf breeze was again not as long as Hudson Valley Flap, but it started on November 11th, 1987, and kind of went through May 1st, 1988. It would get revamped again in 1990, but I'll get to that in a minute. Ed Walters said he was frozen by a blue beam from this craft. He said he saw the craft deposit aliens on the road, and they began speaking to him telepathically in both English and Spanish, and showed him a book about dogs. People, kind of, in 1990, he'd moved out of the house he was in when this was happening. He had about 19 encounters with this object in various pictures. So in 1990, somebody had moved into Ed Walters' old house and claimed they had found a model that would almost perfectly reenact his photographs. And the news got involved, and they went out, and they were similar. But Ed Walters says, you know, the model wasn't his. It wasn't left behind to be found, that somebody invented this model to discredit him. Ed was believed by some, mostly because he turned down a $100,000 book deal about his experiences and also passed a lie detector test. So this is one of those cases, people argue it both ways depending on which side you want to look at and where you want to believe the model came in or didn't come in. We don't know exactly what's going on with that one, but maybe the alien was just lost and needed a navigator. Mayhem in Manhattan. So most of us know this as those who read the book, Witnessed by Bud Hopkins, knew her as Linda Cortez. Now we all know her as Linda, I'm gonna botch her name, but Natapoli. You guys can look it up. So basically, it was November 30th, 1989, and it was witnessed by over 20 witnesses. 2 were bodyguards for a very powerful foreign diplomat. Sometimes this case is known as Brooklyn Bridge abductions. What they witnessed was Linda being floated out of her 12th floor window and then taken into the ship. The best version of the story is Bud Hopkins witnessed. Do not watch the Netflix one. It is trash. Don't get Peter going. He is actively in a lawsuit with them over this, along with Bud's daughter. They basically took the story to get the attention and just trashed it and made it daytime TV. It's ridiculous. But yeah, no, it was one of the most well-known or most witnessed abductions. I mean, for the most part, we hear of this happening all the time. It's one of those rare cases where people actually saw it. Big Mac attack. The 1990s basically was a decade of research for Johnny Mac right here out of Harvard. He thought when he started looking into the abduction phenomena and the UFOs and stuff that he was going to find out we were all crazy, that there was some type of mental illness. He thought he'd find a reason, but he didn't expect the reason to be because it was true. You know, and the further he got along, he started realizing not only is it true, it's done with deliberation and purpose. There are too many consistencies from case to case to case that you just can't overlook and say this is a random thing. So obviously we lost John, but he was a great help to the field, and again, hailing from the East. Phenomena in Phoenix. I think most of us remember this one. March 13th, 1997. Hundreds of witnesses, well, basically the world watch. It was able to be seen from parts of Nevada, obviously the whole city of Phoenix. News cameras are rolling. We kind of all watched it with them as they tried to convince us that these were flares being dropped in a routine maneuver. They did drop flares earlier in the day. It didn't match timeline. It didn't match the appearance. And it was so recorded, there was no way to get around it. You couldn't, this isn't like you can say, oh no, that's not what they saw. We know what they saw because we saw it too. It was everywhere. It's one of the biggest widely cited, witnessed accounts. Then, to try to make it all better, the governor decided he was going to hold a press conference, got the news and media all together, got up on stage, and said they had found the culprit, and dressed out, pulled out a 6-foot alien in a costume, handcuffed, and just laughed it off. And that's what we were left with. It was not obviously a great excuse, but it's what we got. Excuse me? Yeah, thank you, that's a good point. He actually had seen UFOs himself, the governor, and believed in them, but just weighing his political career, decided to make that move. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. All right, we don't have any kids in here. Yeah, this was not a great day for ufology or humanity. March 22nd to March 23rd, 1997. Marshall Applewhite ran the Heaven Gates cult. He and his followers believed that there was a UFO trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. And to get there, for their souls to be able to catch this UFO, to get to where they were supposed to be, they had to kill themselves. 39 people died that day. It was the largest mass suicide on U.S. soil. So yeah, not a great one for the history books for UFOs or just mankind. Mint condition. This is, of course, the USS Nimitz, November 14th, 2004. Wouldn't really find out about it until 2017 from the New York Times article written by Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal. But this is one of the first of 3 videos the Navy decided they would show the public that things were happening. Most notable from the USS Nimitz, well, maybe not most notable for us from the USS Nimitz was David Fravor, who testified at some of these congressional hearings and stuff. He's actually right here in New Hampshire. We tried to get him for this year, but he had other obligations. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave off as far as going through cases to the dates from left to right. Some of our objects floated in like butterflies, and some of our cases stung like bees, which is a good time to mention Muhammad Ali's discussing his thoughts on UFOs in September 7th, 1973 on The Tonight Show. But there can only be one winner. And we have to weigh a lot of things to discuss it. But I think the clear and cut winner is all of you, because you have the power to make your own decisions. Just because I'm up here does not mean you need to hang on every word. I can be mistaken. Just because somebody's on TV, use your own judgment, do your own research. Don't believe everything you hear and see. So we do a meeting once a month in Newmarket on the first Wednesday, where we discuss all types of things from UFO to consciousness if you're in anything weird, reach out to me or just stop by. I will be in Maine next weekend with Nomar Slevik, speaking on granite skies. You can get granite skies, again, like I said, Amazon, or you can go through Nomar's site, just look up Slevik and you'll find it. But if you get it through Nomar, you'll get it signed. And then granitesky.org if you need any assistance or have any questions. I harp about this every year when I'm up here, so I'm not gonna make this year any different. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide. If they can't get the help they need, how can somebody dealing with a UFO problem get it? Suicide does not cease the pain, it puts it on other people. Call somebody, anybody. We've got about 15 minutes left if there's any questions. Kathy. Because I think they knew they needed an excuse. They absolutely did, and the drop pattern was completely different. Flares blow in the breeze. I mean, it was not a great excuse, but none of them really are when you look at it. Any other questions? Yes.
That LA incident that you talked about, whatever happened, how was that resolved?
They just said it was war jitters and kind of moved on.
So did the UFO?
Yeah, just eventually somewhere in the haze of gun smoke disappeared. We'll get to you in a minute. Yes, in the back, you had your hand up first.
I saw an old interview with John Lennon at the time he was living in New York City. I mean, you know, it was like the mid-70s, so past his psychedelic use. But he saw something, I think it was, you know, when he was living in the coast. You know anything about that?
Not quite off the top of my head. I know he saw something and somebody else witnessed it with him. I think they watched it for about 15 minutes, but other than that, I don't really have any details on it. And you had a question, yes?
What are your thoughts on 3i Atlas right now?
My thoughts on that are we are going to find out in a couple months. It's, you know, I have no way of knowing. Most of us don't. We're relying on what they tell us. And like I said, I don't trust everything you read. Don't. You know, it could go either way. It really could. It could be something totally in between too. So that's why I say I think that one I'm just gonna wait and see with the rest of us. Any more? No? Well, thank you for your time. We're going to take a quick break, and then Peter will be back up to announce our next speaker, Mr. Haunted. Thank you.